Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's Fiduciary Wealth Management webinar. My name is Matt Penfold, and today I'm going to be talking about the Spanish compliant investment bond and the QNUPS. So one versus the other, and which is best for you. So today I'll be talking through the features. Clearly, this webinar is aimed at UK expats either already living in Spain, those who are planning to relocate in the near future and starting their planning now. So I will just give you a bit of a spoiler so far. The question is which is best for you. We won't be answering that today. Hopefully the webinar will be informative, but the fact is there is no one size fits all for your financial planning, and it's important that you have a consultation with an advisor who understands these products and others out there to assess what is perfect for you, because it might be the Spanish compliant bond, it might be the QNUPS, it might be both combined, it might be a third product, who knows. But today we'll give you some information, and then once we finish the webinar, you will have all our contact details, and we urge you to reach out to have a quick chat with us. So a very quick introduction. It's Fiduciary Wealth Management here. Matt Penfold here speaking on behalf of the company, and we're based here in Gibraltar. Our core clients our market is Gibraltar, Portugal, Spain, and the UK. And yeah, you might be thinking, okay, well, I'm based in Spain. There's advisors nearish to me. Why would I want to work with a company in Gibraltar? So I'll answer that question for you. Firstly, all our advisors here are regulated to give advice in Spain and the rest of the EU as part of our membership of an EU regulated network. I think that's important. Secondly, our home regulator here is Gibraltar, and we're all also authorized to give advice in the UK. Now, what that means is regulation and advice isn't particularly robust in Spain, not like we experience in the FCA. So as an FCA authorized firm and a firm that operates in Gibraltar that models the UK regulation, we're effectively for you a UK advice firm who has knowledge and the ability to advise you in Spain. So really the best of both worlds. So if that sounds good to you, then enjoy the rest of the webinar and feel free to reach out. So the Spanish compliant bond and the QNUP. So firstly, what are they? So the Spanish compliant investment bond is a tax wrapper that surrounds an asset, so a portfolio of assets that you can hold. The Spanish compliant bond is commonly referred to as the closest thing to an ISA that we have here in Spain. You're probably aware of, once you relocate out of the UK, then the ISA wrapper no longer works for you. So Spain, they don't acknowledge the ISA. So any investments held within an ISA or savings held in an ISA, you will have to pay tax on those assets held in the ISA. Now, the QNUPS is a pension scheme. QNUPS, it stands for Qualifying Non-UK Pension Scheme. And the reason we're comparing the two today is because a QNUPS isn't like your traditional pension where you pay in monthly, you receive tax relief, maybe your employer makes contribution. A QNUPS is funded for a lump sum investment. So is a Spanish compliant bond. So they're very kind of comparable in that sense. So you have a lump sum maybe from sale of properties in the UK, sale of business, your investment portfolio in the UK, your savings, anything along those lines, and one of these may be the perfect vehicle for you. So let's cover the features quickly. So taxation. So firstly, capital gains tax. We talked about if you have ISAs or investments in the UK, then you will have to pay tax on these. Now, both the Spanish compliant bond and the QNUPS, any assets held within there, you do not pay any tax, no capital gains or income tax or dividend tax until you access the money, until you make a withdrawal. So on that basis, it's, one for one, they're equally the same. So the taxation does come in when you access the funds. So let me cover the Spanish compliant bond briefly. and I will share my screen there, and you should see that diagram. So it's a very simple example. I won't talk through it. I'll allow you to go through that yourself in your own time. But effectively, what it's saying is um, the Spanish compliant bond, it works on what they call tax deferral. So you don't pay any tax until you access the money, and then you only pay tax on the gain element of it. The bond provider calculates what percentage of your withdrawal is return of capital and what percentage of gain. And then the relevant tax rate, which is capital gains tax rate in Spain between 19 and 23%, you pay tax on the gain only. Any tax that you do need to be paid is paid directly to Hacienda, the tax authorities. So that saves you the work to do there. And then you receive the net amount. So in this example, very simple example that you can pause this webinar and go through, the effective tax rate is just 6.3%. Now for a QNUPS, the taxation works slightly different. It's a pension, so therefore any income is taxed as income tax. So Spain, like in the UK, is you add up all your income that you receive during the year, and the amount you tax is based on that. So the more you earn, the higher tax rate you pay on those higher amounts. We've got these tax bands that increase. In Spain, the tax bands are a bit more complicated because they are calculated using a combination of the state tax, sorry, the national tax and the regional tax. So it does vary a little bit from kind of region to region. Now, the good thing about the QNUPS is because it's the way it is funded, then Spanish tax could look at it similar to a compliant bond in the sense that they only want to tax the gain element of it. But they don't have the knowledge of pensions or the sophistication in that respect to see what is the gain and what is return of capital. So you can use something called a temporary annuity. So a temporary annuity is a way of structuring the income payments that you take. And it depends on the length of the temporary annuity and the amount you take in, but that will reduce the taxation you will pay. So, for example, if you have a temporary annuity for the longest term, 25 plus years, you will only pay tax on 25% of that withdrawal. If the temporary annuity is shorter, that 25% is even less, but 25% is the highest for the longest term. So effectively what happens is you make a withdrawal, say 10,000 euros. You only pay tax on 2,500 euros of that, the 25%. Then the tax rate is applied to that. So say, for example, you are on a 20% tax rate, one of the lower ones, then you pay 20% of the 2,500 euros. So you're paying 500 euros in tax. In that example, the tax rate works out around 5%, something like that. Which in this example, purely for this example, it's a bit lower than the Spanish compliant bond, but I could use a different example for both where it works the other way. And this is another example of where it's important to have that discussion with someone, because the amount of tax you paid is dependent on how much income you're taking, maybe how long until you take that income, what other income streams you have. So it's important to have that assessment before you decide which of the products is better for you. And then maybe that decision may not just be based on the tax rate. There are also other issues. So we talk about the products themselves because we're the financial advisors and the products are provided by third parties. So what sort of options do you have with that? So with a pension, the QNUPS, generally this should be held in Malta or Gibraltar. And there are no pension products available or QNUPS or QROPS in Spain. So it'd be Malta or Gibraltar. And there's various different providers. Generally, we will use ones that are the most cost effective, provide the best service, make sure they're the best service, make sure they're the most highly regulated and generally the best for the client, for yourself. For the bond, there's very limited providers. So you will hear the same names used throughout the industry. But what is important is the fee structure, especially with the bond. So the fees between the QNUPS and the Spanish bond, again, it varies on the size of your investment. Again, this needs to be assessed when you're deciding which is better for you. But for the bond in particular, it's very important how the fees are taken, how the advisor is paid. The advisor does their work, you will pay them as a client. How are you paying those? So there are two bases. There's the fee basis, which is what we operate on. And they also call this the 100% allocation rate. So you make your investment, 100% of that investment goes into the bond, then you agree a set fee with the advisor, and then you pay that. Either you agree a monetary amount or a percentage. That's how we operate. That's how it should be set up. But the bond provider also allows the advisor to be paid on a commission basis. Now, a commission is a hidden payment in the background. It can be 7, 8%. We've seen 10%, even as high as 12% before. So that's of your capital, 8, 10% paid in fees. You've agreed this straight away. But the advisor might say, okay, it's okay, commission basis. And I've heard this before. The bond provider pays the advisor, so you don't have to pay us. I mean, strictly that's true, but it's also complete rubbish, because what happens is the bond provider pays the advisor up front. So advisor gets their big fat 8% payment. Thank you very much. I'm going to move on to the next client. And then the bond provider, they're not going to pay that out of their funds. They then take the payment from you, the client. And so that means you're going to make large payments over time to this bond provider, but it also means that you will be tied into that bond for 6, 7, 8, maybe 10 years, which, you may be planning on keeping that bond for that time, but sometimes people's circumstances will change, and you should always have that option to be able to change your situation. So really the conclusion to that is you should always set up a bond if you're doing so on a fee basis. If you come across an advisor who says, let's do it on the commission basis, walk away from them straight away. In fact, even if they say to you, look, we can do it commission or a fee, what would you prefer? Again, they shouldn't be giving you that option. You should walk away from that. It should be fee basis every time. That's how the UK FCA works. They barred commission in the UK. Unfortunately, that's not the case in the offshore industry. Therefore, you just need to make a smart choice and not work with those companies. How easy is it to set up these products? Again, that depends on how efficient your advisor is. Of course, there's going to be paper that you will need to complete and sign. You will have to provide documents, proof of ID, proof of your address, things like that. The advisor and the bond provider has to do that, know your customer checks, make sure everything's compliant. That's very important. But in reality, you're now here in Spain or planning to move to Spain. Like all of us, you want to enjoy your lifestyle in Spain. So the advisor should be guiding you through that process, taking that burden from you. And again, that's important. Another important reason why you align yourself with someone who's working on your behalf, who has your best interests at heart and can help you through that process. So a couple of other important points to cover. Wealth tax is one that people ask because we're unfamiliar with wealth tax. We don't have that in the UK, or at least we don't for now. Wealth tax, like a lot of taxes in Spain, is dependent on what region you live in. So where you live, you may not have wealth tax. It may be a high amount till you trigger that. Some areas you will have to pay wealth tax depending on how much how much is the value of your assets. A Spanish compliant bond does not protect you from wealth tax. Some people say it does. That's complete rubbish. That if you've got assets with a Spanish compliant bond, it contributes to your net wealth for the purpose of wealth tax. For the QNUPS as a pension, this is a little bit complicated, and it's where Spanish tax is a little bit grey. It depends on the region you live in, your age, and if you're already taking income from that pension. But it is possible for the pension to be outside of your estate for wealth tax. That is changing. We hear a lot of changes, and for this in particular, it's important to listen to our advice, but also take the advice of your gestor, tax advisor, accountant, whoever you are using in Spain. And the last point is inheritance tax. And inheritance tax is very important, just in general. So if you're unsure about your position with inheritance tax, so you've got inheritance tax in the UK and Spanish succession tax, reach out for us. It's conversations that I personally have with people quite often, and there's a lot of kind of misunderstanding regarding it, and they're completely separate. They operate in two different ways. Spanish succession tax, it depends who your beneficiaries are. It depends, again, what region in Spain you live in. UK inheritance tax is the one to look out for. And there's a misconception that we exit the UK, we're now a Spanish tax resident or another country, we're no longer liable to UK inheritance tax. That's completely false. UK inheritance tax is based on your domicile, not your tax residency. We acquire our domicile at birth, and it's difficult to shed your domicile. You have to be out of the UK for a long period of time, establish a new base in a new base in a new country, cut all your ties with the UK. Our advice for this is always, because your UK domicile isn't clear as well. There is no test. You can't be assessed. HMRC won't tell you, yes, you are non-UK domicile. So our advice with this is always plan for the worst. There are a lot of options as an expat to protect yourself against UK inheritance tax. And if that's something that may affect you, reach out to us and we can have a chat with you about this. I'll give you our contact details at the end of the webinar. My personal email address, you should see that in small writing. Just let me get there, just down below at the bottom of the screen. Feel free to reach out. And the reason I mention inheritance tax in today's webinar is, again, makes no difference with a Spanish compliant bond. That's part of your assets, part of your estate. For a QNUPS is a pension, and therefore potentially is outside of your estate for UK inheritance tax. Now, I say potentially, and that's because the QNUPS has to be set up as a genuine retirement scheme. And what we mean by that is it has to be in line with your overall wealth, your age, and your income requirements. So it has to be a genuine pension. So to give you a practical example, if we have an individual who comes to us, they've just moved to Spain, they're age 75, they've got a net wealth of, say, 3 million euros, and they say, well, I've got an inheritance tax problem. I acknowledge that. QNUPS sounds brilliant. Let's put 2.5, 2.8 million in the QNUPS. Jobs are good. That won't work. That's an inheritance tax fudge. It's very clear. HMRC will see through that, and those assets would be included in that individual's estate for UK inheritance tax. But if you've got someone who's planning earlier, maybe they're investing a lower percentage of their overall estate, they're using that to enhance their kind of retirement provisions, increase their kind of pension amounts, then that could work. And again, that's something we want to assess on an individual basis with you. So really that comes to the end. I wanted to keep this webinar as brief as possible, comparing the two. As I warned you at the start, there's no clear answer to which is better than the other. It really depends on your individual situation. And that's why I urge you to reach out to us here at Fiduciary Wealth Management, and we're more than happy to arrange a free consultation with you to chat over your options. So you may be planning on moving to Spain, and that's a great time to plan ahead. You may already be living in Spain and want to discuss your financial planning. You might have been here some time. You might already have a Spanish compliant bond or a QNUPS or something similar, and you may be concerned that, is this set up correctly? Maybe your investments aren't growing in value, which is very important, as you were expecting. Happy to give a second opinion to anyone in that situation as well. So I will bring up our contact details here. So there you go. You see at the bottom of that, our website, fiduciarywealth.gi, our email address, inquiries@fwm.gi, or call us directly on 00350 200 50982. from the webinar earlier, you have my email address if you want to reach out to me directly. And yeah, this is very important of your planning. We're more than happy to help you. In fact, that we look forward to talking to you. So thank you for joining me for today's webinar. Enjoy the rest of your day, and I hope to hear from you, some of you shortly. Thank you. Goodbye.